Hey, coaches, Scott Reslow here from ResV System. Hope you guys are doing well. Certainly, the high school guys are in their season, and really the college guys are pretty much done, if not going to the NCAA tournament. And this is not so much for the college guys, but probably more for the high school guys. Let's talk about timeouts today. So, what I'm going to do with this video is I'm going to talk about how I call a timeout, stigma behind the timeout, when to do it, what you're looking to say, and all that fun stuff. So let's get started. So, quickly, let's talk about the stigma that goes along with calling a timeout in our sport. Unlike basketball, baseball, football, or any other sport that really comes to mind, you call a timeout in volleyball, and there's sort of a negative connotation that goes with it. The other team starts really cheering, really getting excited. And so automatically, when you call a timeout, your kids and your players are coming to the bench in a sort of, oh shucks type of moment, a feeling of, it doesn't necessarily have to be complete negativity, but there is sort of a feeling of, oh man, here we go. And then what you say in that timeout is going to be key to try to reverse that feeling. And there's a lot of reasons why we call timeouts, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But that stigma is really unique to our sport. And it's one of those things that you have to be cognizant of as you go through your match. I know for me, as I've gone through it, I've really started to think about that often, especially the last 5 years. I've been like, all right, when do we call a timeout and what am I trying to get out of it? So that's the stigma, and you have to be aware of it. And once I was aware of it, I've started to call better timeouts. Because of the stigma of the timeout, I've sort of come up with this thought process. And certainly it's not a unique thought, but it's something that I like where we have comfortable timeouts and uncomfortable timeouts. So, a comfortable timeout for me is when I'm looking across what is happening in the match, what my team's doing. And that's the main thing I'm trying to accomplish. I have a vision of what my team's supposed to look like in every situation. And when those situations occur and I watch how we perform, if it doesn't meet what I think the vision is, then I feel like I need to tell them something and I need to explain this this is why we do this in this situation. So that becomes a comfortable timeout. Like if I see something slightly wrong, and usually it'll be early in the set, and it doesn't feel like a pressure moment. I'll call a timeout and say, hey, listen, guys, this particular situation, let's say we go into high ball and we don't get an approach. In my view, we go into high ball out of system. There's got to be a massive approach by the pin, whoever's hitting the ball. So, that's a comfortable timeout. Hey, we just ran out of system. We got no approach. That's not what leads to success for us. So we're going to need to fix that. Make sure you get a big approach. The other thing to do is to celebrate something that you've been working on during the season in the practice gym. Let's say you're in a situation like for us this year at South County, we were having trouble blocking anything out of the back row in the BIC area, and we wanted our outside hitter to support block there. So, the play happens. Our outside hitter finally supports on the BIC, and I called a timeout. I said, hey, man, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for you to come in, set that help set the block against the BIC and support. You did a great job, outstanding stuff. And, again, use the time to celebrate the player. So that's a comfortable timeout. Then the opposite is the uncomfortable timeout. And this is the one that we're all sort of familiar with, right? Things are not going well. The other team's on a service run, and we have to stop the momentum. We have to figure out a way to get back on track and bring the team back to focus. That's a standard one that everyone feels, and certainly when you're in that situation, it can be very challenging because, oh man, everything's going wrong. So that's the difference, the comfortable and the uncomfortable. But I like focusing a little bit on the comfortable, especially early on in the match. So when you're in an uncomfortable timeout in the situation where things have gone wrong, you need to have a plan of what you're going to say, and you don't want to overwhelm your team or your players. There's a couple things that can happen, right? You can have a sidebar conversation. Let's say the setter is really struggling, so you want to grab the setter and talk to him. And meanwhile, have your assistant coach or whomever's helping you address the team, or sometimes the team captain can address the team while you're having a sidebar conversation, or you're going to address the team as a whole. And either way, must have 3 points, both technical and tactical, that you want to do. So 3 points total. So not not three technical and three tactical to equal six, but 3 points total. And it could be technical or tactical. Hey, the reason we're not passing well is because we're not low enough and we don't have our pre-hop going. That could be something that's technical. And then tactical, hey, anytime the setter's in the front row, we want to set the ball to our attacker to go over the setter because the setter doesn't block well. It's a general tactical situation, but you want to provide three separate things and you want to provide answers. I know early on in my career when I would call a timeout, hey, we're not passing well, guys. We got to fix it. That doesn't help. Like, it doesn't give them anything. They know that too. The timeout is to provide an answer and a solution. So again, have a solution, both technical and tactical, and make sure that it really doesn't go over three, because at the end of the day, you don't want to overwhelm the situation. Consequently, if they call a timeout, if the opposition calls a timeout, that's still an opportunity to work on things. Go back to the vision. Hey, if we're matching up to the vision of what your team's supposed to look like, that's great. If not, that's a moment we can actually jump in there and say, hey, we need to do this, this, and this. Or, and probably more importantly, we want to keep focusing on generating points. I mean, I got that tip from Ben Josephson. I thought it was really cool. Hey, they call a timeout. We're going to keep promoting the idea. Keep generating points, guys. Keep generating points. The one thing you might want to do as well is assure whoever's serving for you, because that's generally what's going to happen. It's going to be your serve, and they're going to call a timeout. You want to make sure that they understand that they're doing a strategic and in serve there. So many times coaches call timeouts, and then your kid's about to serve. He comes out of the timeout and wails it out of bounds or misses in the net or something. I mean, if they're calling a timeout, they're in trouble. They're uncomfortable. So we want to make sure that serve is in and keep the pressure on. So some common times to call a timeout. Well, there's a whole bunch of opportunities. The first thing I'll say is, try to stay away from calling a timeout at 24, right? So if it's 24-18, don't call a timeout there. I mean, there's really no need to. The matches or the set in particular is probably out of reach. But that type of timeout, unless it's 24-23 or 24-22, all right, but 24, that's not really the time. But some opportunities to call. Hey, if you're playing a very good team and you don't want to get down by 4 or 5 points, that's a great time to call a timeout. It's past five, it's really hard to claw back into the set. If one of their best servers is coming up, man, that's a great time to call a timeout. So you want to put some pressure on the server to come out of the timeout and execute. Maybe you get an error. It's another great time to do it. Certainly, if you see anything that you want to build on, as I talked about earlier, great time to call a timeout. And then lastly, if you have a great lead, let's say you're up 7 or 8, and then they go on a run and it dwindles to like 2 or 3, that's a great time to call a timeout. You don't have to wait till even to make that call. You can keep that 2 to 3 point advantage and call a timeout there and see if you can reset the situation. So that's my video on timeouts. I hope it was helpful, hopeful and helpful. Feel free to like and subscribe, guys. Have a great rest of the week. Looking forward to seeing how all the other games turn out, and certainly as the Division 3 and Division 1 NCAA tournaments are going forward, looking forward to seeing how that stuff goes as well. So stay well, everybody, and until next time.